I'm going to start. Okay, so
fine with recording as long as it's not published anywhere without me giving permission.
Okay. So I guess we're ready to start. Whoever, if somebody wants to time keep, they want to.
Okay.
How much time are we taking?
I don't know.
You're going to do it, Bill?
Yeah, I'll do tonight.
Maybe we can do a little bit more time, like 6 or 7 minutes, or a little bit more than 5.
Sure. What do you want to do?
I guess at least 6. See how that works.
6. We'll go 6.
Okay. So whoever wants to start, what does a culture of empathy mean, or anything else that's really alive around that?
So I'll start. Carolina, would you, are we picking, we're picking reflectors? Okay, so Carolina, will you reflect me?
Okay, I'm listening.
Is that all right? Okay, all right. So I think, so the first thing I think of is a culture of empathy means that a cultural norm, or a norm in the world, is that people respond empathically to someone who's in difficulty.
So first you want to focus on what it's kind of popular understanding that popular understanding of culture of empathy. So people mostly understand empathy as a situation of our response to somebody in pain. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and I think, and it's not just an understanding, but that, in other words, in my view, we would have a culture of empathy if, when someone was having difficulty, people generally responded to that person with empathy.
So you believe that this is actually good attitude, and if we would have such a culture when people responding actively to the person with difficulties of any kind,
right.
If other people would react with empathy, then actually that's what we need.
Mm-hmm. And I think that means, to me, responding empathically means with a desire to understand them, meaning understanding what's happening to them, what their feelings are, and what their desires are, like their values, what NVC might call needs. So a desire to understand those and a desire to meet them. So Mickey Cashtan talks sometimes about empathic action, meaning that you actually do something other than speak or reflect back, but that you actually, you take an action that's intended to show understanding or to meet someone's needs.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this part will be difficult to reflect for me because there is a lot.
Mm.
So if somebody is in difficulties, responding empathically for you means that it is not just attempt to understand the other person, but also kind of, I don't know how to say that, accompany feelings of this person. That's what you meant?
Yeah, so
kind
on
responding to the needs of this person.
Yeah, I was saying that empathic response or empathic understanding would mean wanting to understand what's happening, how they feel, and what their needs are. So maybe those 3 things. Okay. And then it might also include, an empathic response might also include an empathic action of some kind, other than just trying to understand them.
So you mention understanding, but also acknowledging what this person is feeling and what their needs are.
Mm-hmm.
And also another thing is, so those three components, understanding, feelings, and needs. But you mentioned also the response by action.
Yeah. In other words, my point being, it might not be verbal. So a lot of times I think generally empathic response, people think of it as some kind of verbal reaction, listening or reflecting back or something. It could also be some other kind of action that's nonverbal.
So by action you mean nonverbal reaction. It doesn't have to be verbally expressed. Empathy, it might be something that is more visual or
Could be smiling at them, could be giving them a hug, could be handing them something, could be, I don't know.
Yeah, so yeah.
So, and the question is, what does a culture of empathy mean? Is that what the question we're addressing?
Yeah. What does a culture of empathy mean?
Let's see if it doesn't mean something else to me. A culture of empathy means. So I would also say that if we had a culture of empathy, it would mean that we do what I just described on a one-to-one level and a community level and a societal level. So it would be. We would have systems. So I was mostly describing what a one-on-one interaction might look like, but it would also mean that we had systems at the community and larger levels.
So you signaling that you are describing just personal, person-to-person level, but you also think about the same kind of relations built on such an attitude on the community level and even on the whole society level.
Yes, so, thank you.
Yeah, so it's kind of structural.
I feel heard.
A quick note here. Did that feel like enough time? I was just wondering, we don't want to...
I could have kept going, but it's also fine.
Okay, because I'm thinking maybe 10 minutes even, so you can kind of, everyone can really express themselves.
That can be a lot of time to listen and be stimulated, because all the things that I might say, other people might say them too, and I'm guessing others might want to speak.
We could maybe change it later. So
I think it's fine.
Okay.
So can I choose? Well, maybe I choose because you're doing notes. Okay, so I will ask Bill.
Okay, I'm listening.
When I'm thinking about everything what Edwin was saying, Lou was saying, and when Lou mentioned this level, the structural element of culture of empathy, I realized, well, it triggered in me the concept of structural violence of Johann Galtung. And it's kind of idea that violence is sort of immanent on many different levels. Well, I'm probably simplifying too much his idea, but it is there in a structure, hierarchy, but also in so-called symbolic culture, in social culture, in sort of in social structures that kind of, in some part, it's natural. And I don't have answer to that, but I'm thinking, how is it possible for fully, completely replaced this structural violence from our life that is immanently in it, in our system, in our civilization, in economical structure, in everything, and replace with different type of relation? Probably is not possible. However, the thing is what kind of attitude we keep to it, because that triggers the idea of three phases of, oh gosh, Building, Kenneth Building wrote this book, Three Phases of Power, where he described the situation that actually destroying is part of life. To grow food, you need first to destroy soil. Then you can put seed in it, and then you give water, and that's how you create something. So in this sense, the destruction and construction are immanent part of one. The thing is what we do with them. What is our attitude to that? Sorry, I'm talking too much. Oh gosh. Sorry.
Okay. So, so essentially, you're wrestling with the issue of what this question means. It's a big question, and so the first thing that came up was this idea of structural violence. That structural violence is built into our society, and you kind of went into a situation starting to think of, well, how do we take structural violence out of our society? And you quickly came to the conclusion that nope, can't do it, at least in the next hour. And so there was this issue of structural violence. And then you talked about this book. I'm sorry I didn't get the authors, but The Three Phases of Power. And then
Kenneth Building. He was Quaker by choice, because he wasn't born in Quaker community, but he became a Quaker.
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 Yeah. Oh, okay. So there's okay. So
Kenneth Building.
What building?
Building.
Kenneth Building. Yeah. Okay, Building. Sorry, probably my pronunciation. I will write in the chat his name.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the Kenneth. That's the guy's name.
Yeah.
Okay. The point is that that destruction is part of this, of sort of like you talked about the analogy with the farm. So destruction is part of growth. And so now you're trying to integrate destruction into this. How do we build a culture of empathy? Where do I see destruction? How do we use that to make it fertile land for growth?
Well, actually, that's not what I mean. Well, it's okay to sing that this way, but what I meant, if violence or destruction is immanent part of our life, and we can't avoid it, we can try to change that. We can try to make it smaller, more effective for us. But we can't completely liberate us from violence. It's actually immanent part of our life and relation with others. The thing is our attitude to that. What we do with this simple fact that how we treat this element of destruction and violence. And I'm thinking actually about attitude.
Okay. So what you're seeing is
empathic attitude, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Your screen froze for a second, so I thought you were stopped talking. So then you're talking about that where you're seeing the culture of empathy emerge, since you can't get rid of structural violence, is our attitude towards that violence. And then the the culture of empathy. So how we deal with that violence, our attitude towards that violence, and what's the empathic way forward in or to deal with that violence.
Yeah, and only one more thing.
Sure.
I know that it sounds like I'm talking more like sympathy than empathy, but I actually mean empathy. I don't have clarity about it, but I mean really empathy, not sympathy. Okay.
Okay. So you're talking about empathy, not sympathy, although it sounds like sympathy.
Yeah.
And I believe that you would say that empathy includes a more centered view than just simply sympathy.
A more what view?
I'm sorry, centered. In other words, with empathy, with sympathy, you're sort of giving yourself over to the other. And with empathy, you're giving yourself off to the other, but you're also holding your place for yourself, as I see it.
I'm not sure about it,
Okay,
but
so
I
that's not
suppose
right.
that's your
Okay.
point of view. But it's okay. It's okay.
No,
It's
I
something
understand.
to
So let's
think.
know. This is about getting clear. So
Mhm.
so in other words, what I got the crux of the thing is your attitude towards this structural violence.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't have clarity right now about it. I just feel
Okay.
that there is something
Okay. So
to
then my
think.
interpretation was my overlay. You don't have clarity over it.
No,
That's
but
okay.
it's
Yeah.
interesting what you said.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Sure. Okay. All right, Edwin?
Yep, listening.
Okay. So uh I've been thinking about, empathy as far as the group, versus the individual. And it's so empathy, I think, or empathic culture, emphasizes and treasures the individual, while at the same time, the individual feeling so nurtured then naturally expresses what people naturally do, which I believe is much more um, uh, deeply cored in our system than violence, and that is to cooperate collaboratively.
So you're saying that like a culture of empathy supports the individual and who they are, and if the individual is seen, then they're willing to collaborate,
right,
and work with others. So there's sort of an importance of the individual's experience.
right, and that's why I think that the empathy circles are so effective, because they take down a situation where people have to put up their defensive filters. So without the defensive filters, you can see yourself and the other without the distortion of labels.
So it's sort of like you're saying that if people can really be seen for who they are, that they're going to want to work with, they're going to want, it's sort of a positive, they're going to be positive, constructive, and that the empathy circle is sort of a practice that helps foster that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that that in a culture of empathy, there should be deep honor and acknowledgement of individuals doing pro-social things. And like I meant that, for instance, like Lou talked about, helping people in difficulties. And I believe that Carolina touched on it. I'm not remembering exactly how, but her attitude towards violence. All of these are with a vision to make things more collaborative, more loving, and more functional.
So there's sort of an intention that you're working, a culture of empathy would be is to make things more, the relationships more loving, more collaborative, and more functional. So it's like a positive, it's moving towards a positive direction.
Right. And so that's why also I think key to our goals is a concept of a human being as as I've said, a dynamic thing, a person who's changing and growing all the time, and not just simply whoever, you happen to see in the bathroom mirror that morning.
Mm-hmm. So part of a culture of empathy is having an awareness of a growing, dynamic person.
Right.
That's kind of, growing. Mm-hmm.
And part of a culture of empathy would be to support and celebrate that growth in individuals.
Okay, so we culture of empathy. We support each person's growth towards those values that you mentioned: love and cooperation, and
mm-hmm. Yeah, and just one thing, but core, I think, if we're going to create the culture, is to acknowledge it. And that was one of the things that was a constant learning for me in my job, whereas I have these social, functional assumptions, but my students wouldn't share them. And so that made for a lot of comedy. But it just made me, as I looked at other great teachers around me, you see that they celebrated, they illustrated these internal struggles of the students, these accomplishments, and they made them for everyone to see. And that helped the students see themselves in a different way.
So there seems to be two parts here. One is it's kind of nice when you have a shared vision or share something that you're going towards. But when you were with your students, you didn't have that shared vision. You had one, they maybe had another, and that that you could use the situation to sort of teach that sort of a direction, teach. I don't know if I'm...
Sure. I kind of got lost a little bit myself.
There was like each thing, there was a learning,
the basic idea is just simply that we illustrate, we make vivid what to many people is hidden. And that's their struggle. Like one of the things that I did is that if a student really had to calm down, I said, okay, you have, free time, even if it was like an academic period. Great, go ahead, calm down. And what I did is I was saying, because you're working just as hard on managing your emotions as you would be in here. Right now, that's taking precedence. Sorry, that's me. So in other words, really acknowledging the inner struggle and the inner triumphs that each individual. And that's it.
So what you were trying to do was you see the importance of sort of making visible what's hidden, and when you can bring that out into the open, that's like a core piece of what you were trying to do. Maybe a culture of empathy is bringing forth what is sort of hidden and not articulated.
Thanks, Edwin.
Okay.
I feel fully heard.
Okay. Then Lou.
Okay.
I enjoy hearing everybody's kind of different takes on this. It's like each thing that I hear, it kind of stimulates a bunch of other ideas. So that's it's fun.
So you're enjoying hearing all the different perspectives and ideas about culture of empathy, and you're recognizing that they stimulate, all the different things that people say stimulate you a lot, and you're excited by that.
Exactly.
Another feeling too, just excitement or something else too?
I feel a little bit of dread in how to capture it.
Right.
It's like,
that's what I was sensing.
I keep, thank you for asking that, because it's how to articulate this, because I just see the importance of articulating and bringing it up, like Bill is saying. I totally agree. It's like, if we can, this idea, vision of a culture of empathy, if we can articulate it and share it, it makes it easy, more accessible for others. And I think it creates a sense of clarity, coherence, groundedness, something like that. But how to do that in an effective way, and yeah, and having struggled with that, that maybe that's not, maybe I don't have the best skills for it, but then how to find those skills. There is a path, but to find that path to articulate it is, yes.
Okay, so you're both excited by the idea and the value of expressing that clearly, because you could see that you think that would make a big contribution, and it would really help move people towards a culture of empathy. And at the same time, you feel some dread or overwhelm around how do we actually get there from here, because it's a big thing, and
yeah,
how do we capture it and make sure that it's expressed clearly? You're a little afraid about that.
Yeah, there's so many things that come up around that. So I do see a real importance for this notion of a culture of empathy versus sort of this individualistic empathy. It's like, it seems to be that like 90% or more of the discussion around empathy is sort of around this individualistic empathy. Is you as an individual being empathic. And if we take that perspective, the world looks different than, hey, we need a system, a whole culture of empathy. And the criticisms that I come up here a lot, from the academics, it's all kind of geared, if you see things from an individualistic way, it's like, oh, you're giving all this empathy, you're going to be taken advantage of, and so therefore empathy is bad. But if you see there's a relationship, and what's the level of empathy in the relationship, the mutuality of empathy, things look very different. And it's like that vision is just not clearly articulated just out in society. So I think it's really important it would have a real impact, a clear, articulation of that.
So I think what I'm hearing is so a culture of empathy to you, an aspect of that is really very important is the system level cultural aspect of empathy, and not so much the individual one-on-one, that you think a lot of the criticisms of empathy, both academic and otherwise, are around the one-on-one exchange of empathy. Is that really useful? Is it good? Is it whatever? And so you would like to see emphasized much more kind of a system level, the system level culture of empathy.
And what Bill is talking about, so this individual, that the individual is part of it, that is a piece of the larger vision, right? That we have multiple perspectives, and that we need to hold all those sort of perspectives. The perspective of us as a group here. What's the level of empathy in this between the four of us here? We have a little mini culture of empathy, and holding all of our perspectives as well as the as the individual. So anyway, that's. I come up against it over and over again, talking with these academics and stuff. And when I come into the relational stuff, all their arguments just kind of fall apart, and they don't want to talk to me anymore.
So the relational aspect of empathy, or sorry.
That's it, the relational,
I lost it. Hold on, I just grabbed back onto it. So you were saying that a culture of empathy, an important attribute of it is that people are able to actually hold multiple perspectives on what empathy is, so that it's one-on-one, and it's relational, and it's societal, and it's not one thing, and that's an important attribute of it. And then you were reiterating that a lot of the criticisms from academics, which you had been frustrated about and had difficulty helping them to see, is that empathy is not just one-on-one; it's relational.
Yeah. And I just had done an interview, had just talked with one of the authors of the dark side of empathy. Oh, okay. Well, I'll stop there. That's because I could go on forever.
Well, you want to make one more short point?
Okay. That he's making the point oh, there's two people in conflict. If you empathize, you'll take one person's position. That's his argument. And therefore, empathy has this dark side because you will identify with one side against the other, which totally is empathy. The relational empathy is I empathize with one side, I empathize with the other side, and I want the sides to empathize with each other. So it becomes a total empathic relationship between all sides. And so so when you measure empathy, you have to measure the empathy between all parties. What's the level of empathy between all the parties? And it just totally changes the perspective and you know how you, and so a big part of it is this sort of individualistic view that it is a real block to this larger vision.
Yeah. So you had a conversation recently with the author of The Dark Side of Empathy, and he's very much framing empathy in terms of one person to the other person, and him worrying that empathizing with someone means that you're agreeing with them or that you're taking one side or another
Identifying.
side. Yes, and you've tried very hard to try to make it understood that the way you see empathy is more relational, and you want everyone to empathize with everyone, and that's what a culture of empathy means.
Yeah, that's it.
Empathizes with everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So I'll go to Bill this time.
Listening?
Yeah, so it's rich conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's important in a culture of empathy for people to understand that empathizing does not mean agreeing.
Mm-hmm.
It just means approaching others with curiosity and and openness, rather than evaluating rightness or wrongness or of what they're saying. That's part of what being empathic means to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. I mean, and I think that if you have that view of empathy, then you don't have to worry about taking sides, because you're taking everyone's side, or you're trying to understand everyone, including yourself. I'll stop there.
Sure. So you were kind of going off of what Edwin was talking about in relational empathy, and and you felt that a major misconception about empathy is that it does not mean agreeing, and that it means more like meeting others with openness and willing to, to hear them. And so you were also reinforcing Edwin's idea that empathy means empathizing with, all parties and the whole situation, the culture.
Yeah. And I would say, you heard openness, and I would say curiosity is also a really important word to me, because if you're curious,
I don't know who's that.
Is someone calling me? If you're curious, you really want to know. You really want to understand the other person, and I think that's an important attribute of listening empathically.
So you wanted to say not just openness, but curiosity, kind of like a welcoming curiosity.
Yeah, both of those are important.
Yes.
The other thing that popped up for me while I was listening to the other parts of the conversation are about fierceness and toughness and autonomy. So I think, I think probably the stereotype of being an empathic person and the stereotype of a culture of empathy would be a culture where everybody's nice to each other, meaning they agree, or they don't, they don't make waves, or they don't, like, if they disagree, they probably keep quiet, because you want to keep things even. And I do think that there's a place. So the question of where in a culture of empathy does fierceness and toughness belong? And so, and I'll answer that question. So for me, I think they are a component of empathy, of honesty,
Mm-hmm.
and integrity. So I
Mm-hmm.
think you can be very fierce about being honest and being having integrity,
Mm-hmm.
and you can still be empathic.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's possible. I'll stop there.
Okay. So you were wondering, in listening to everything that we're talking about, where fierceness and toughness comes in, because they're usually not associated with empathy, and yet a culture of empathy should be able to incorporate, the total range of human emotions. So where do they fit in there? And they fit in where you see is an honesty and integrity in holding that.
Yes, thank you. And listening to your reflection, I realize, part of empathy is mirroring the person that you're listening to. So if they're coming on very strong and they have really strong feelings, then you can have you can meet that with a certain kind of toughness by staying in the conversation and reflecting back what you're hearing and holding to the integrity of the process and not giving up your honesty about what's true for you. So that's the way in which toughness and fierceness is an example of how they might express themselves while being empathic.
So you're talking about, how that can be done, and you're talking about fierceness and toughness in holding, like, for instance, to the integrity of the listening circle process. And very important, is to let the other in, but not to lose yourself. You don't have to lose yourself in that.
Thank you. Wow, I feel so heard. Thank you. And the last thing I'll say is about autonomy, which is, and that has to do with, so in a culture of empathy, the danger is that the culture forces you to be empathic. And that goes against people's natural sense of autonomy, which is to say, I'm an individual and I have choice. And a lot of times people will go the opposite direction just to show themselves that they have choice, just to prove that they do have choice. And so while I'm all behind the idea of creating a culture of empathy, there's a tricky thing, I'd say, when you try to create any kind of culture, which is that if you're going to force people to adopt that culture, you're going to get people who are going to resist that because people naturally want to be free and they want to be able to express that, and it will come out. And if they're not allowed to express it, it will come out in some other way.
So
if everyone's forced to be empathic,
sure,
and forced to use empathy circles,
So you're also thinking about, like a possibility of a, excuse me, an over-reliance on the form and structure of the empathic society that would force people to be empathic or to follow certain, norms, and that pushes, that makes resistance. So while you want to create a structure of empathy and have those values be high, you don't want to create an authoritarian system that insists on those.
Yes. Or if you do, that it's not particularly empathic. In some ways,
Right.
You're probably violating your own values if you do that.
Right. So anything that's overly prescriptive, it has a danger of turning into its opposite from empathy.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel fully heard.
Okay. All right. Let's see where we go. Carolina?
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So, I'm kind of like taking this all in and trying to incorporate. So I did talk a lot about individualism, or the individual and the celebration of the individual. And then I know that Edwin was talking about individual empathy, which is something that's sort of different. And so I just wanted to say that I agree with Edwin's idea of relational empathy, and that I don't want to deify the individual, but celebrate the choices that they make. And I'll stop there.
Okay, so you're trying to kind of take in and bring in everything you heard, and you focus particularly on what you were saying before, that you were talking on sort of individual relation, but you feel like you need also acknowledge this Edwin approach about empathy as a relational thing.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like I lost some part of what you were saying.
That's okay.
Okay.
For now. No. Because then and that's it. So so essentially what I think is that one of the greatest fulfillment of an individual is to participate empathically in a group.
So you think that actually the most important achievement of culture of empathy is what's happening in a community, and something more than just relation between two persons. That's what you mean?
Well, what I'm saying is that there's a synthesis there's a coming together and integration between the individual and the group.
Oh, I'm not sure if I got it.
Okay, let me try to. Okay, so what I'm saying is that the individual should be honored for their struggles and their for being who they are, but essentially in a culture of empathy, that path leads, as Edwin says, to relational. So the individual's path leads to the community.
So, well, I still have some problems with understanding you, but if I understand you correct, you mean that, well, there is one thing is kind of personal path, personal life, with all the struggle everybody is with, but eventually it leads to communities. That's what you said, but it's not clear what. I'm afraid I don't get it.
Okay, what I'm trying to say is that that the individual and the community are integral. They're part of the same thing.
Oh, so you mean that we can't see person without community? This person belongs, that's what you mean?
Sort of, but I'm saying that the community sees the person. The person, feeling heard or seen, then feels good about integrating into the community.
I feel like I'm not getting
Okay,
something.
let me try.
Sorry.
Come into the end. That's okay, Carolina. That's fine. It's hard. It's a difficult thing. Let me again go back to my teaching. A young boy who was really a prodigy at math, and by the way, who did very well, came to us one day, and his mother was calling him shithead for everything, saying, shithead, feed the dog, shithead, do your homework, shithead. She didn't use his name, his own mother. And he was feeling like a shithead. that's because he was being labeled like that constantly. And so that's a time where the individual, where we said, your mother is your mother. You have to live, you didn't want to create, anyway, you have to live with your mother, but your mother's wrong. Or you had to stick up for the individual, that he's not a shithead. And that's what we said. We said, you're not a shithead. You're a fine young man, and I hear that, and I'm sorry your mom said it, but you're not a shithead. That's a time to support the individual, and I just don't want that to be lost. That being said, then once he felt better, he participated effectively in the school community.
Oh, so I demand for giving to Bill more time because I took time from him by not understanding him.
That's okay.
Sorry, Bill.
I'm not worried about it. We'll just try to wrap it up real quick.
Okay, so I see two things in what you're saying. From one side, I hear that individual need to feel okay with him or herself to be effective part of community.
Mm-hmm.
But also not, that probably is my interpretation.
No, that's exactly, I feel very hurt on that.
And the other thing that I suppose might be my interpretation of your words, not reflecting you, is that actually, like you and other teachers try to build positive sense of ourselves in this boy, it was kind of community action to this boy.
Yeah, the first one is exactly what I was saying.
Okay, so the second one is more my interpretation.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, that it was hard. That was an example of where how people, like as Lou said, are at a disadvantage in our society, and so that's you're not a shithead. Okay.
So you kind of demand to give people kind of opportunity to become positively connected to ourselves, to themselves,
Mm-hmm.
to be effective part of empathic community.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm saying. Thank you. I feel fully heard. Thank you, Carolina.
Okay. So that part was difficult for me. Okay, I have to choose somebody. So maybe whom I wasn't, well, Lou, maybe Edwin.
Okay,
I will choose
listening.
you. Okay. So that's probably why I have so much problem with reflecting Bill, because I was developing my own interpretation. And my understanding of relation between individual and community is kind of, that's how you can heal yourself, through relation with the community. Obviously, this community has to be sort of empathy circle, because if it's not, it will destroy. But I see self-healing, and probably this is my personal experience, I perceive my self-healing through relation with community, not in the way, okay, I have to make clean the mess with myself and then I will become part of community. I don't believe it's possible. I believe it happens simultaneously, kind of. It has to, maybe this is not what Bill means, this kind of line history of development. First I do something with myself, then I become part of community. That's maybe not what Bill meant, but for me it's important to see it as kind of how to say that, simultaneous and parallel or kind of intertwined process. of building empathic community, but also empathic person. So I can't split those two elements. I don't see it that way.
So you're trying to understand what Bill was saying. You're sort of struggling with that, and you think that maybe part of it is because you have sort of some notions, some ideas about relationships, and you're kind of like tied in with your ideas.
Yeah.
And your ideas is that that healing is not just like an individualistic thing that you heal yourself, but that you heal in relationship with others, or sort of this dynamic, this relationship dynamic that happens for healing within community, and that the individual is healed through relationship.
So there are two parts of this problem for me. One is what I'm doing with myself, with my attitude. Do I doubt about my deeds and try to doubt in good meaning, in good sense, that I'm trying to question myself if what I'm doing is empathic, is supportive for me and others. So this permanent examining myself is kind of important element of personal attitude. And the other thing is how the community is organized. And maybe I stop there because now I want to ask three important questions.
So you're seeing that for yourself, you're constantly questioning yourself if you are being empathic. And so that's like an ongoing question that you have. Am I being empathic in relationship to these people? And then you also are just looking at how society is structured or organized.
Yeah, and to address this problem, I'm trying to visualize sort of science fiction. Yes, we're talking about science fiction right now. It's science fiction. Let's try to imagine all we were talking until now, and put it together with our reality. All we are talking in an office when we have to do some bureaucratic office, I don't know, municipal or office. We have to we have some needs. We have to do something. We need some documents. We have to communicate with some bureaucrats, officers, do something. Okay, this is one thing. How to do that in corporation, in our professional life. Suddenly, how it should be, how this all we were talking might be executed to this. Is it possible? I doubt about it.
Yeah, so you're looking at, you're like, how do we build a culture of empathy? And you're seeing, which would be, how do you do it in a bureaucratic government system where all the bureaucrats working? How do you create a culture of empathy with all the bureaucrats, or in a corporation? And then you have some skepticism that it's even possible. You're kind of like doubting that this is even possible.
Does the culture of empathy we're trying to imagine stick with economic system we have? I don't think so. With international affairs between our states, I don't think so. With army and relation, kind of military relation hierarchy, Is there a culture of empathy? I don't think so. When we try to make it more kind of concrete, but to do that with that, because we may build a vision, but then we have to see how it works with this reality we have. So suddenly we have to change not just we have to not just build the vision, but also realize that we need to change something in this reality we live. It's not like only our attitude build culture of empathy. There is certain set of values and conditions we live in that determine us, our behavior. It's not like we are completely free to do whatever we want, and being empathic or not is just our will, good or bad. It's much more behind our behavior. So what to do with that in this hierarchical, full of structural violence reality? That's my question.
So you're just saying this society, you have a question, like you see society as being hierarchical and having a lot of violence to it, military, government, corporations, etc.
Yeah.
And then if you have a vision of a culture of empathy, you know, you're going to come up against that, and how do you do it, and feeling maybe skeptical that it's possible, like maybe feel hopeless that.
No,
No,
I don't feel hopeless. I am just curious.
Mm-hmm.
What has to be changed? What kind of social structure? What kind of economic system? What kind of governing we need to create that will kind of resonate with culture of empathy?
Yeah, so you just see you're not feeling hopeless. You just have a sense of curiosity. Like, you know, how do you really change the system to bring in a culture of empathy? And so you're just sitting with those questions and that curiosity, and kind of like Lou said, curiosity is a big part of it.
Yeah. And the thing is, this is the last thing I want to say, that that we need vision. We need not only a vision of culture of empathy, but we also need a vision of transformation to culture of empathy in a system we live. And by transformation, I mean not just working through our attitude, community, so to speak, attitude, but also creating different conditions that people help to strengthen empathy, not to diminish empathy. Because
So
we live in a system that diminish actually empathy.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying you see that we live in a system that diminishes a culture of empathy, and we need more than just a vision of a culture of empathy, but sort of a vision of how transformation can happen with the existing culture. So you like to sort of expand it to how to really have that transformation, and you're just really curious about that.
Yeah, and I would like to point those elements, crucial key elements of this system that blocks empathy development, kind of determine and limit ability to develop culture of empathy. So
you're seeing a lot of blocks to empathy, a lot of blocks to a culture of empathy, and you really want to see how do you sort of transform those blocks? Or
I believe that one of the most important is what? Time. Caro always speaks about time as a main factor. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, so you're just seeing that one of the blocks is people don't have time, so we need to include the aspect of time in that vision.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel heard.
Okay. Bill, speak to you.
I feel like my time was up. I was talking more than my time was.
Oh, actually, I started a bit late, but
Okay.
I think you're within the ballpark.
Okay.
You're
Okay.
among empathic friends here.
So
I'm sorry, Gilbert. I'm sorry.
Oh, just I will mention that the fundraiser has been accepted, so it is live. I just put the link in there. So we're ready to start inviting friends. You know, when we're done with this, I'll invite friends. And anyway, I guess I'm speaking to Bill since something happened to Lou. No, maybe I spoke to you before, right? So,
I'm here.
You're here.
I thought you picked Bill already.
Oh, I just mentioned that we just did a fundraiser.
I was listening.
You were listening?
Yeah.
How come your video? Did you turn off your video?
I did, because I was moving.
Oh, okay. I thought you were. I see.
Too much sun in the other place, so I just.
Okay. I thought you had kind of dropped your connection. I didn't. Somehow it's not showing. Okay, so.
No, I'm here.
See, I think I talked to Bill and Lou already, so I'll talk back to Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, so where to go with culture of empathy? Yeah, so there's a whole, you know, I feel a little anxious because, you know, Lou was saying, oh, you know, we should just speak directly, not use empathic listening because of time. Right? It's just what you talked about. And then I feel a little bit of anxiety because, I'm feeling a sense of impatience, you know, so it ties in with your sense of time.
So you're referring to the problem of time, and you recall the situation when Lou was saying that probably we should talk just directly without our method because it's more faster.
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly we came to the problem of time.
And I noticed a little bit of anxiety in myself because of time pressure.
So you suddenly feel like, yes, there is a problem of time and anxiety, and you feel sort of uncomfortable with that, as I understand.
Yeah. So, and I also feel kind of humorous about it too. I think it's kind of funny.
Because that's what I mean. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is, in terms of this vision of a culture of empathy, I see it as an ongoing, sort of a never-ending process to develop. And I think of it like the regenerative culture work. There's this concept of regenerative culture, and the guy David Wall has, you know, written a book about it, but it becomes an ongoing sort of a discussion with people, and you're always sort of deepening the concept and growing with it. So I see it as something that's not going to be sort of like ending, but is going to be sort of an ongoing sort of a concept or dialogue.
So what I'm hearing, it's not just your anxiety about speaking directly because it will be faster, and maybe it's much more. You start talking about the concept of regenerative culture and the fact that the whole thing we're dealing with is a rather process than visualizing once
once and for all,
once and for all the idea, and then it's ready to spread. No, it will be a process, and actually it's impossible to give the final it's like it's impossible to give a
Hmm.
final image of it.
Yeah.
So that's how you feel anxious.
Oh, I don't feel anxious about that. I felt
Okay.
more anxious about people saying, "Oh, we got time limits," sort of. So that's why I feel a little anxious. There's sort of an energy of, "Hey, we got to get this done," and that's it. So, not like a little bit of spaciousness
So
around it
no,
for
you don't.
myself.
Okay, so you don't feel anxious about this, more like a process than like a state vision of culture of empathy, but you feel anxious about
People's
uh,
impatience.
impatience, lack of time that is needed to spend on things dealt with empathy.
Yeah, yeah, that took a lot
Sorry.
of time. I feel hurt.
Sorry, so I will choose Lou probably now.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, it looks like I'm right about time. Yeah, that's actually the problem I experienced by myself. This mm, well, people, for example, come to the empathy circle and they are kind of behave, okay, I can be only half an hour and then I have to go. So I will speak first, I will say what I have to say, and then I will go. No, that's not how an empathy circle works. Sorry, it's mutual. So yeah, empathy requires time, a lot of time. I stopped there.
So you're just reiterating, or you're expressing something that you've noticed that you think is true, which is that empathy requires time, particularly the mutuality part of it, because the mutuality part of it says that we both speak and listen, and that you've had experience with people who say, "I don't have a lot of time, so I just want to say what I want to say and then go," and you're saying that's not empathy.
And how actually it can work in a situation in our daily life, wherever we are. We do shopping, we're going to the doctors, we have to we have some issues in office somewhere we have to deal with, we dealing with our job, and everything is about time limitation, making everything faster. And we actually understand efficiency and quality as something done quickly very often. And I suppose that's how we achieve so much misunderstanding. Well, this is not the only reason, but one of the reasons. This lack of time creates this huge one big knot of misunderstandings. I stopped there.
So you're saying that that empathy takes time, and that what you notice is that, or what you see as a trend, is that efficiency and speed are valued a lot, and that often that's the way quality is measured, or one of the significant ways quality is measured is, is it fast, is it efficient, and that you think that that is kind of works against, in your view, that works against a culture of empathy, because it takes time to be empathic. Is that right?
Yeah, and understand. And
Oh, yeah, I'm
sometimes,
sorry. And there was this other piece about that you really think that one of the big components of misunderstanding is that people are just going too fast, and so they misunderstand each other.
Yeah, and actually this fast culture of how to say that, of fast, no, fast it will be like not eating, culture, culture of speed, probably I should say, culture of speed. uh, uh, well, so I feel like we need to replace culture of speed with culture of empathy, almost like that, because I believe that this culture of speed and lack of time to understand, to reflect back, to digest what somebody said, and come back another day and say, yeah, I think I understand what you mean. If I don't have time for it, for sometimes digesting unconsciously somebody that happened, or somebody who did something, or somebody said something, or I said something, I need also digest what I did or said. And if I don't have time for it, all the decisions began to be made in some sort of violent mode. Democracy, as when we understand democracy or as a voice of majority, it's actually violent understanding of democracy, and it's created because we don't have time to spend. We can't spend enough time to trying to understand each other, so we choose to vote, and what majority chooses, that will be. That's actually a very violent way to make decisions, but we do that because we don't have time for real mutual understanding. And there is a lot of such small and bigger things somehow connected to time, to the process, that should be very slow. And I stopped there because I'm talking too much.
Okay, so I'll try to reflect this back.
Sorry.
No, my phone rang and then the person left a message. So that's why I turned my microphone off. So there was a lot of noise happening. But actually, the gist of what you said that I got was that you really believe that taking time, slowing down and taking time is a very important attribute of a culture of empathy, because we can't really understand each other and take each other into consideration if we don't listen to each other and understand each other fully. And it takes time to do that. And then you gave an example of, democracy. Are we really practicing democracy if we don't take time to do that? And that, and that you think it's a form of violence if we don't do that and we just say, well, let's just vote, and then we just do we do whatever the majority wants, and that kind of discounts understanding or taking into consideration what others want, what everyone wants. And and so you think a culture of empathy would provide mechanisms for more inclusion.
Yeah, so yeah. Maybe I stopped there because I could speak longer. I think my time is up. Yeah, Bill? Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I've heard.
Thank you. Okay. So I guess, well, first off, I have a question. What time are we going to?
We had set 2 hours.
We had. So 12:30 is what we...
Yeah, that's another 30 minutes. That works.
Okay.
Does that work? I mean,
it's a stretch for me, but I will do it. Okay, so then I think I'm either speaking to Bill or Edwin, but I'm not sure which. Is it Bill? Are you, to complete the circle, do I speak to you?
It's either one. It's kind of going around. I think you spoke to me last, though. So
okay, so I'll
speak
to Edwin then.
Okay, listening.
I don't think I've spoken to him yet. So I'm going to be I'm worried. I'm a little afraid I'm going to be the dissenting voice. but I think lots of different flavors are important.
So you had a little concern, worry that you're going to be a dissenting voice, but you do see that a variety of flavors of ideas is important too.
Yeah. And it's interesting what I've kind of rediscovered about myself is that I do like to be the devil's advocate. And that's not something I would have said about myself, but it's interesting that when I find myself in situations where everybody's talking one way, I have a desire to make sure that other perspectives are heard. But so that's just, I don't know. So I'll just stop there.
Yeah, so you're noticing something else that you didn't really think of yourself as a devil's advocate, but you see that you have that quality that when things are going in one direction, you want to, kind of show a different direction. So in a devil's advocate sort of a
and it isn't
way.
So much that I disagree with what's being said. It's more like I think there are flavors that need to be added. So I think, so for one, like what Carolina was saying about democracy, I think American democracy actually has tried to do some of those, have some things in it that give power to the minority, so that it isn't just the tyranny of the majority, which is, if I'm in the majority, then I can just do whatever I want, and other people that have differences of opinion, they're just bowled over. They have no power. So in our government, there are sources of leverage and power that minorities have, and one of the problems we have now is that the minority has utilized those very effectively to kind of completely gum up the works, because the minority does have power. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, so you're addressing what Carolina said, sort of that democracy is sort of authoritarian, or and that the minority is overwhelmed, but there are actually in the system, there are sort of mechanisms for giving the minority a voice, and that actually the minority in America has actually used that to sort of mess up gum up the works, I think you said.
Yeah, and hearing you reflect that back, I'm realizing that what I'm describing actually really validates what Edwin was saying about empathy being relational, because the reason that it's become so difficult in America, the reason the politics has become so stuck, is that nobody trusts anybody. So people don't feel understood, and there's not much trust. So everyone's using whatever power they have to stop the others. And the system actually was designed at a time when there was more trust. And so there was trust that the norms were such that you would not use your power that way. That was outside the norms of what would happen.
Mm-hmm. So there's in our current system, there's just a real lack of trust. So everybody's sort of using all the tools they can to sort of battle. And there was more trust, you feel, kind of earlier in the history. And so just the importance of that relational trust in the system.
And
pointing that out.
And what it reminds me is you can't really design a system that works perfectly without some kind of relationship. There isn't a system, because if there's no trust and people don't feel understood, they will manipulate whatever system gets created to mess it up or exert whatever power they can. And so what's needed most is like a culture of empathy, where people feel understood and considered and included. And then if that really happens, then you almost don't need a structure. Because people actually are cooperating with each other. So I just think that's interesting.
Yeah, so you're just noticing that you can't design like this perfect system. It's not the system, it's actually the level of trust between people. And if there's a huge amount of trust between people, it almost doesn't matter what the system is it's that trust that's really foundational. So, and that trust is really part of a culture of empathy, that we need that trust to, that's kind of the essence of a culture of empathy, having that trust.
Yeah, so that makes a really strong argument for building a culture of empathy, because that's what we need. And what are the mechanisms for doing that? This kind of goes to what Carolina was saying about it's one thing to express a desire for it and maybe express the values are clearly, but then the question is, how do you get there? How do you, both what are the practices and the systems that encourage it, and then how do we get from where we are to there? What is how do we make that transition? So I think those are good questions.
Yeah, so you see these are real good questions, like what is a culture of empathy, but how do we get from where we are to there? So what's the pathway to that?
I think also we need to check our assumptions about what empathy looks like. So the idea that, we can only have an empathic dialogue if we do an empathy circle where we are reflecting back each other's words, I don't think that's true. So I think we can listen to each other with empathy, really be listening carefully and taking each other in without doing reflection. Now, there may be times when people don't know if they're being heard, so they would like a reflection so that they know that they're being heard. But I think it's possible to have empathy without necessarily reflecting back what people are saying.
Yeah, so there's being clear. It's important to be clear on what empathy is. It's not just reflective listening, and so kind of be really that you don't have to use empathic listening, reflective listening to have empathy, and just making that point that what is empathy? What do we you don't have to just do reflective listening.
Thank you. I feel very heard.
Oh, okay. Then I'll speak to Bill.
Something?
Yeah, that's the aspect of trust that Lou is mentioning is, I see that as central. That I remember talking with Dave, about the politics. The left is very suspicious of business, and then the right is suspicious of government. And so there's this mistrust of government and business, right? And there's this, and that the core of that is trust, right? You can trust business, you can trust, but underneath that, it seems that having each of those systems are vulnerable to not being supporting empathy, right? If the government is highly empathic, very sensitive, and I've seen plenty of government officials who really try to talk to you and work things through, then that's what's important. And then the same thing in business. There's plenty of people in business that are really sensitive and thoughtful, and so it's really so I really agree with Lou that it's the empathy behind it. It's the trust in the that empathic culture behind those systems that's really important. That so in a sense, it doesn't matter if it's government 100% government control, 100% business control in the economy. It's that it's empathic behind those systems.
Okay. So you were looking at Lou's issue of trust, which was really big to you, and you reflected on the fact that the left wing doesn't trust business and the right wing doesn't trust government, and that what's behind that, and you can have those institutions, but really the qualitative difference is whether there's an empathic intent behind it, because those institutions also, you've dealt with individuals who have been empathic and listened and things like that.
Instead of intent, maybe intent is part. So the intention that there's an intention there,
right? And
then there's an intention, a value, a mindset, a way of being, even maybe kind of expanding. Those are all kind of components. So it's kind of this empathic way of being.
Right. So you wanted to make sure there's not just an intention, but it's an intention that leads to specific actions and a whole way of being.
Yeah. And then the challenge is how to, articulate that, and then, how to move from where we are to that. So that's come up. Both, Carolina and Lou have mentioned that. So I'm kind of just sitting with that too.
So then you're also contemplating on how we start to make changes in society that would be more amenable to creating a culture of empathy.
And again, it does seem to me that having that vision, articulated, so we're kind of like have it down, be clear about, at least some of the core principles, that just sort of helps orientate. So yeah, that's,
So you're seeing that being able to have some clear core visions or goals or values of a culture of empathy would be helpful into creating a culture of empathy.
And that's going to be it's going to be an ongoing sort of a dialogue too about that, because things always come up. But it seems like that intention, just having the intention, and it's like having an agreement or having an invitation, which an invitation to an empathic relationship, is sort of part of it.
So you feel that part of, if we develop these goals and things like that, you would hope that a member of the general public would see it as an invitation to join a culture of empathy.
Yeah, or to have that relationship. I have an invitation, and I would like an empathic relationship with everyone here.
Okay, so not simply to enjoy, to join as sort of a label, but to actually experience an empathic relationship.
Or an invitation to have a mutual, so there's a mutual intention to it. Like, we have this intention of this, it's sort of like the Constitution, right? That it frames the United States, the whole government, is we have this Constitution, which is, sort of agreement. I mean, I didn't agree to it when I was born, but it's sort of, there is sort of this agreement, this core agreement that we're born into, so.
So you're looking at basically a structure in which all parties would feel sort of like, I guess, positively disposed to participate in a culture of empathy. And then you use the Constitution as sort of a structure, but not as a overly prescriptive structure.
Yeah, well, it's that holacracy, which I just saw, that the holacracy has a clear purpose, and then you sort of agree to the purpose, you've got a shared intention, and that creates a direction for the energies to how do we sort of collaborate and move towards something. If we have a clear vision, we can then move towards it, and that vision can be modified and worked on, but it does create a sense of direction. I mean, I feel a sense of for me, I guess I could say having this vision of a culture of empathy gives me a lot of groundedness. It's like when I'm in a lot of these chaotic situations, the left and right, I just kind of have that vision, and it's like, okay, I'm going to listen to you, and I want to support you in listening to each other. It's kind of like a simple, thing. It's like we just have, everyone can have these dialogues. I have that trust from my own experience that through that dialogue, eventually, if you just have enough time, eventually things kind of get worked out, and you can create sort of a shared direction.
Okay. So you're seeing the idea of creating clear goals and things as a way to help build a sort of a holacracy where there would be a shared intention, but there would be many different ways of creating that. And through that, an integral is an empathic dialogue, either using listening circles or not, but where people are listening to each other and feel part of it and feel that they're pulling in the same direction. Yeah.
And I totally agree that, the active listening, empathic listening is, not needed for empathy. It's more like a crutch. It's like, it's just, ideally everybody just have this empathic presence, and you wouldn't even need kind of tools like that. But it seems like there is a need for sort of social structures that kind of help. And the empathic listening is one, all the conflict resolution practices, and all those tools are just very helpful. But it is a deeper mindset, and that's really involved.
So you're agreeing with Lou, and just generally speaking, that there's no one form that contains empathy. Empathy can be expressed in a variety of different ways, and that you're looking to kind of move forward and create a vision that can both guide and also hold the diversity and be expansive. And that the other important thing is that this is not a finished product. You don't get like this and this is it, but actually it'll be a structure that encourages innovation, creativity, and development going forward.
Yeah, that's I feel heard. That's
okay. All right. All right. Lou, I'll talk to you.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to be a little contrarian myself.
Okay.
It's just I don't know if you're contrarian. Maybe we have to mud wrestle to see who can be the contrarian. Now, what I see is the solution to time is value. People make time when they understand value. And so I'll stop there.
So you are in a bit of a contrarian mood also. And the first point you wanted to make was that people give their time to what they value.
Right.
And so if we want, and I guess I'm kind of extrapolating to this,
Sure.
that if we want to create a culture of empathy, we have to show people the value of it, and then they're going to do it.
Excellent. And I think that's a large focus. And while I don't think I agree wholeheartedly that empathy, you don't need empathy circles or any particular form to show empathy, I find that the empathy circles are an excellent form of emotional exercise. And like, for instance, I don't run. I feel exercise is important, but I don't run. I don't do other things, but I do other exercises that sort of fit in. And so exercise is important. What exercises, you do can be individualistic, but I think that it's important in defining the goals that we sort of have this sort of component, this exercise, this ongoing maintenance element to it. I'll stop there.
So you're saying that you agree with Edwin, there are lots of different ways, or me, that there are lots of different ways to express empathy, but you also think that it's really important that that we regularly, that people regularly practice empathy or expressing empathy, because just like physical exercise, this is an important kind of emotional exercise for people to learn it and for them to stay healthy, empathetically healthy. And so it's important for people to do that regularly. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And and then the next start is to, is we have this information, and I've actually felt really heard. That was, I appreciate that. And that, then how do we actually go about doing it? What are the next steps? That's what comes up to me. And then I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay. So you're just appreciating, feeling heard. And what comes up for you then is, how do we get there? What are the practices, or what is the path to go more towards a culture of empathy?
Right. And specifically, though, in this group, creating the vision. Creating the vision.
So you didn't mean necessarily the path in the larger world, but the path in this group. What path are we going to take to actually try to express this clearly?
Right. And while I understand that we need to, I mean, I think Carolina is very valid about the baked-in violence in our society. I don't feel that we have to solve that. I think that it comes up. I think that's what the power of this empathic, is that it comes up and it kind of is more basic than political things. So if people see themselves as empathic, then they will make different political decisions.
Okay, and you're saying that one of the things you think about moving along the path to a more empathic society is that while you agree with Carolina that there are forms of violence that are kind of baked into the system that as it currently exists, you don't think that trying to address that specifically is the way to go. You think it's more about building an empathic culture, building the alternative, and that if we do that, people will make choices, and we will eventually have a more empathic culture.
Right, and not that people shouldn't get involved in politics or apply it, but that for the purposes of this group right here, we have limited, ability to change those things. That's all.
Right.
And I feel heard. Thanks.
Okay, and so part of the reason you feel that is because you're not saying that people shouldn't try to change things that are wrong with the big system, but that in this group and the work that we're doing, we have a limited amount of ability to do that, and so you'd like to focus on creating, visioning the system we would like.
Great. Thanks, Lou. I feel fully heard.
Okay.
Okay, we have 12 minutes left, so maybe just do a quick debrief. One is meet again next week at 10 o'clock. Would that work, Lou, or do you still need the 10:30?
No, I think 10:30 is the thing I do in the morning. I think I need that.
Okay.
I might be able to meet at 10:15 if we want to back it up 15 minutes. I could probably
10:30 is fine for me.
Okay.
If it is for everyone else.
Yeah, I think let me look at next Monday and see. Actually, so I do have a conflict. I have a meeting at noon. So let's try. So let's do 10:15.
Okay.
That would be better for me. And it's possible that meeting might shift, but I don't think so. So we'll do 10:15, and I'll go for as long as I can before I have to leave.
Okay. Works. Then in terms of posting this, I started creating a website sort of for, documenting this material. So it'd be handy to post the video. I just upload it. It's not like anybody watches this stuff, but it's easy to keep track of it. And then if there are people that want to help with transcriptions and stuff, so I would like to go through it and get sort of a rough transcription. So I just want to check about the posting of it.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. So I think it's great to, to kind of think about these things. It brings up, the issues, and I'm going to try to listen to it and, transcribe some of it, kind of a loose transcription. It's hard to do, full transcriptions because like for every hour, it takes like 2 or 3 hours to, word for word transcribe it. So, I just see it over time to kind of refine the sort of a process for developing this. And I'm sort of imagining maybe we can create short, written pieces, post those, and then sort of get feedback, and then maybe turn them into articles or something. And maybe at some point it can be turned into a book, and then once it's in a book, then you kind of post it. So anyway, there's a whole process to sort of developing something like this, but that's kind of for me. Any other thoughts?
I'll go next. I mean, I'm grateful for the conversation. It was a rich conversation. I enjoyed it. I think I'm guessing, you know, others have created this sort of thing before, so it might be good to look at an example or to get some kind of concrete idea. Like I had this brainstorm actually about Petaluma Conversations and I wrote down, I want to make a statement of purpose and a set of goals and a set of principles for Petaluma Conversations. And maybe we read some of those, like at the beginning of the session, we read them so that people are reinforced of what we're trying to do. And so I don't know, you know, I think it might be good to start with something like that. So what a statement about a culture of empathy, goals for a culture of empathy, and principles for a culture of empathy. If we just started with some of those, then maybe that could grow into something bigger, as opposed to the idea of like having some big giant vision and trying to figure out what that is.
Carolina or Bill?
Yeah, I like, I think that, you know, the way my mind works is that let's throw some stuff down, you know, and then we go and we kind of, you know, tear it up and build it and, you know, do so that sort of thing. Just kind of get down to some core things. And so, yeah, and that's basically it. I'm not feeling so clear or very clear about the direction at point. I like what you said. You know, don't see that quite yet, and that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I'm not upset about that, but you know, that's just where I am in the process. That's it.
Okay, right. Carolina?
I'm not sure what you meant about this website for making notes. Can you share with us, please?
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm not sure what you mean.
I just created it just a little while ago. It's just to sort of track, you know, what we come up with and document. And
so it's kind of technical website. It's not for sharing with anybody. Is it that anybody with address URL can see it, or is
yeah, you can see it, but you can't edit it yet. So
you don't share it? You know,
I'm trying to find. I didn't have it open here.
Okay. So there was one. I suppose I know now what you mean. It's just I had to kind of imagine what you mean. Okay, let's see, because you gave us link.
So it's just started.
Oh, okay, so as you usually do.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's sort of the typical. It's not good. Helps to organize.
Okay. Well, actually, I had a lot to say, but I will try to maybe write it down and make it more clear before next meeting. Sort of a lot of things to everything you were saying.
Okay.
What Lou said about democracy, what Bill said about the violence. Actually, I agree with Bill.
Yeah, the more we can write things down, the better. Yeah.
Yeah, so probably, well, I hope I will find, as we say in Polish, nomen omen, time. It's from Latin, nomen omen. I don't know how to say that in English. Do you have such expression, nomen omen? No.
It takes time?
No. Nomen omen, it's an expression from Latin. It's like a nomen, kind of triggers what happened to something. Like because it's named this way, that's happened. Sort of fatalistic.
Oh, by the way, Caroline, I do want to mention your fundraiser has been fully funded.
All right. That's exciting.
Thanks to somebody in this group, Bill. So that's.
Thank you. Oh my God. The fastest fundraiser in the history of Facebook and Empathy Circle.
I was looking forward to contributing something too, which I will.
Well, I'm going to up the ante on it. So I'm going to raise it. We're going to go to 700 because I want to contribute too. So.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Okay. A fine investment. It's a fine investment.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, that was my check-in that I have to kind of clarify what I mean, but what with this mess of my notes.
Okay, yeah, the more they're written up and put into the document, that Google Doc, that